G'day and welcome to the first video of what may well be many. It's well past 11 on a Saturday night, so what do all good legal studies teachers do? They read the news. I thought this might be a helpful idea for legal studies students and teachers if I was to read the news and just have a think about what I'm actually reading and how it might relate to the legal studies course. So what I've done is I've jumped on the Sydney Morning Herald and found this article, Push to Translate Official Covid-19 Information into More Languages. This is by Fergus Hunter, March 27 at 6:09 p.m. Official advice on COVID-19 is being translated into more languages amid fears some ethnic communities are not getting enough information about the crisis. The Department of Health has published information in 7 major languages other than English and is working on more, but there are particular concerns for smaller communities who have not been in Australia long and may lack social and family networks. So straight away I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, interesting. There are particular concerns. This is a new trackpad, so sometimes I push down too hard and it tells me what the word means, which is usually unhelpful. So straight away I'm thinking there, okay, we've got smaller communities who have not been in Australia long. And I start to think about, okay, what are the responsibilities of the government for communities when it comes to this kind of thing? What about accessing the law? That's my first thought. Mohammed Al-Kafachi, Kafachi, I don't know how to say your name properly, apologies Mohammed, Chief Executive of the Federation of Ethnic Communities Councils of Australia, said there was a lack of information for multicultural communities. We are concerned that there is not enough information being translated into different languages, especially for emerging communities, he said. I think the whole approach to translated materials is being treated as an afterthought, whereas it should be front and centre, especially for vulnerable groups. Remember, he is the Chief Executive of Ethnic Communities Council, so of course that would be his opinion of this group, of this matter. He said the lack of information was exposing people to misinformation and forcing them to get advice from family and other sources overseas. On the department's website, there are currently COVID-19 hygiene, social distancing and self-isolation guidelines available in Arabic, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, Greek, Italian, Korean, Kurdish, Farsi, Spanish and Vietnamese. There's also targeted radio, print and digital advertisements being delivered in 8 languages, and the campaign will expand to 24 languages next week. Communication activities being implemented by the Department of Health have many focuses, but we are paying particular attention to Australians vulnerable to COVID-19, such as the elderly, said a spokeswoman for the department. So there's an idea. As legal studies students, we should be thinking about community connections and saying, well, of course, if you have communities there that are vulnerable, with people who don't speak English, the majority of those who are at most risk are going to be elderly, and they're also going to be those who are most likely not to speak English because they perhaps travelled here at a later age and were unable to pick up the language, as opposed to younger Australians who moved over here from overseas. So making those connections is often helpful. Just having a think and making those inferences. On top of the federal government efforts, SBS has stepped in with a COVID-19 portal, providing news and information in 63 languages. The Victorian government has made information available in 48 languages, and the New South Wales government has provided information in 20 languages. So there we're seeing a couple of interesting things. Okay, we've got SBS, which have launched this online portal, provide in-language coronavirus information. So you're going to have to start thinking about it and going, okay, well, what is SBS? If you're not sure, it's always helpful to look it up and to actually try and find out what SBS is and what their charter is. So SBS Home, have a look and find an About section. Well, that wasn't very helpful. Maybe it's down here. Codes of practice, about SBS, there it is. Always helpful to check what you're talking about. Welcome to SBS. Various things, that's not helpful either. Who we are. As Australia's most diverse broadcaster, the Special Broadcasting Service holds a unique place in Australian media landscape, inspiring all Australians to, etc., etc. It's inclusive and cohesive. Today, SBS is a modern, multi-platform media organisation with a free-to-air TV portfolio spanning 5 distinctive channels in SBS, NRTV, etc., etc., etc. So there are all the platforms. You might also like this. That doesn't actually help us working out who they are, though. So what do? We keep digging. Let's go to Wikipedia and just try and find out about SBS. There's probably a bunch of them. So we're looking for broadcasting. There we are. It's a hybrid funded Australian public broadcasting radio, online and television network. About 80% of funding for SBS is derived from the Australian government. SBS Online's home to blah, 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 blah. Okay, so as a result of extensive post-World War II immigration to Australia, the federal government began to consider the need for ethnic broadcasting, programming targeted at ethnic minorities and mostly delivered in language other than English, etc., etc. In March 1976, the federal government established the Consultative Committee on Ethnic Broadcasting. Followed by that, initially it was considered feasible as part of the ABC, but that was abandoned. In October 1977, the government announced the creation of SBS as a new independent statutory authority for ethnic broadcasting. Okay, so what we're seeing here is the government is actually got a bunch of languages, but SBS, which is 80% funded by the government, is stepping in as well and providing a portal for 63 more languages. On top of that, you've got different state governments providing more information than the federal government. So Victoria's got 48 and New South Wales has 20. I'm sure with some on the way, whereas they only had 8 and we're getting to 24 next week. Labor MP Julian Hill, who represents a multicultural Melbourne electorate where more than 200 languages are spoken, said urgent work was needed to get the message out about social distancing. We are weeks into this crisis, yet the federal government only has information available in 7 languages. It's not good enough, and they urgently need to do more, he said. The lack of awareness in minority and multicultural communities poses serious dangers to the whole Australian community. Okay, so there's this thought, okay, it's not just the responsibility of the government to help out vulnerable groups. It's also a question of, well, what responsibility do they have for the rest of Australia to ensure that those vulnerable groups don't actually spread coronavirus more? Mr. Hill said the information had to be pushed out to people online and available to community leaders to make sure people got the message. The challenge has been exacerbated by the cancellation of community events and religious gatherings, which can be important forums for multicultural communities to exchange information. Okay, so there's thinking through community events and how information is disseminated out, and this concept of how life has changed due to COVID-19 and the government needing to respond to that. So what are the legal and non-legal responses to this problem? How responsive has the government been? Labor Multicultural Affairs spokesman Andrew Giles wrote to the government on March 17 ago, don't understand what that means, asking for official COVID-19 information to be translated into more languages. So what do we do with this? I've already shown a couple of ways in which it's often helpful for you to do a bit more digging and actually thinking about what you're reading. On top of that, let's have a look at the syllabus and have a think. So for those preliminary students, if I'm thinking about part 2, the individual and the law, we're thinking about the ways in which the law impacts on individuals, and it's referring to legal and non-legal institutions. Thinking about, say, relationship between rights and responsibilities when it comes to individuals and when it comes to the state. So COVID-19 is a great case study for this. This is an example of the state having a responsibility to vulnerable groups in order to ensure that the message gets out about what social distancing is and what they need to do when it comes to this virus. And at the same time, surely when you're looking at a whole bunch of stories about COVID-19, we're thinking about the balancing of rights of individuals with the needs of the state. So there's an example on the paper the other day of an angry dude at the beach in his Speedos yelling at a photographer saying, "This is my beach." That's a great example of the government saying, no, your right to go to the beach has been taken away because you are now a liability to the rest of the community. So what role does the government have in that? It's a really good example of it. And thinking through stories that you've probably read in the last few weeks and have no idea how it relates. Newspapers talking about hoarding of food and hoarding of toilet paper. That's this example of balancing the rights of individuals with the needs of the state. Everyone needs this food. So what does the state do? Does it lobby Woolies and other places to ration? Does it have education campaigns, making sure people aren't hoarding when they don't need to? All of these questions you should be thinking about when you are actually reading these often humorous articles about people, buying 600 rolls of toilet paper and the like. Okay, so thinking through ideas and contemporary issues, you could certainly note that it often says examples that may be studied could include. Okay, so there's nothing stopping you from using COVID-19 as a case study, asking your teacher, can we look at this? This is in the news all the time. It's the only thing in the news. So go for it as a legal studies student. Ask yourself, how does this relate to the syllabus? So law in practice, the importance of the rule of law, responsiveness of the legal system in dealing with issues, COVID-19. All right, so many things in here that really just would hit the nail on the head for looking at this type of thing. All right, when it comes to the content in the HSC course, crime, not so much, unless you're going those people that stole a bunch of toilet rolls the other day. Human rights, though, you've probably got things that you could think about in relation to human rights when it comes to the role that different IGOs and NGOs play in ensuring the safety of individuals in Australia as well. So, for example, there was another article looking at. No, I didn't save it. I'll find it later. There was another article looking at how the governments are working together and how they're not working together. So this question of separation of powers and division of powers, how is state government working with federal government, working with local government, how's that all going to work in this age of COVID-19? Options, surely the number one option that you'd be thinking about in relation to COVID-19 would be world order. That's what I would think. How well is the world cooperating with itself, resolving conflict? COVID-19 is conflict, is it not? It's people trying to survive and countries struggling. How are they going? What are what role does law reform play in thinking about the world and what's going to happen afterwards? Are we going to open up borders once more? Remember that so many different ways of living have completely changed because of this. We almost have a new world order in relation to the closing of borders and stopping travellers from getting into countries and forcing them to quarantine for 14 days, etc., etc. All of this is new. So there's some really interesting things happening when it comes to the law and COVID-19. Okay, so if you're somebody who likes to think about these from a legal point of view, it's such a topical thing to think about, and it might be a more helpful way to think about rather than you just freaking out about it. Actually think about how it applies to the law and to different parts of the legal studies syllabus. All right, so that's me reading the news. I'll sign off for now. Hopefully that might be helpful for some of you.